Hi and welcome. Today I have a piece in my altered board book that's one of the children's books that's pretty thick. And so to prep it, you just sand the glossiness off, and then some people say you should coat it with gesso. Some people say you don't have to. I think if you're gluing pages down, you probably don't have to, but I don't always do that. So I went ahead and just prepped all my pages with 2 coats of gesso, and then the whole book is ready. This one I started to do another project on it, and I just wasn't liking it. So I skipped to a different page, and I'm coming back here using it now because I know I'm going to be covering the whole thing with paper. So then that way I didn't have to re-prep it with gesso. I'm using some digital download prints. These were prints that printed 8.5 by 11. I could have shrunk them up, but I printed them 8.5 by 11, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with them. And so then I thought, well, I'm just going to rip them up and collage them together, both of these pages together. I have plenty left to do something else with them, but I liked them because it looks like these flowers are on top of some sort of ledger or receipt paper, something. And I really love that look. I actually am going to be, the next pieces I add will be also a digital printout of like a ledger book, and just adding those in to a couple spots. So I'm just spacing it out to see how I want it to go. Some people can just rip it up and start laying it down, and I don't know, I can do that, but I prefer to have it mapped out in my head before I do that. So I've got my papers ready, and I'm getting ready to start gluing down. And this one piece right here, on the right, has a pretty open area on it. So I decided I'm going to stamp on it and just kind of give it something there. And I thought this butterfly from Field Notes would be perfect because I will be adding butterflies to this piece. And so I thought that just added a little something. And I did that in, I think it was Pebble Beach. And that's an Archival Ink. So I'm starting to glue. And I'm still fighting the dredges of this glue. You could use a glue stick. I often use a glue stick on paper just because sometimes, like especially if you're going to add a collage meaning on top of it, which I am, sometimes it just kind of bubbles or waves. And this one was okay. I don't think it did that, but yeah, glue stick kind of stops the wavy. I just don't think it holds as well. But now I'm offsetting some of these because it's got such a wide border around the edge of some of these pages, and so I just kind of offset them a little so they go off the page. I do occasionally take some of my raw edges and add vintage photo, especially if they're, I mean, depending on which way you rip them, they're going to have white at the edge or not. So especially if I'm getting the white paper edge, I'll add some distress ink onto it. But sometimes I forget. Okay, so all my pages are glued. Now I just got to trim it to size. I started with a pair of scissors, but I did not too long after that remember that, oh yeah, I want to use a X-Acto knife with these. It just gets a nice cleaner cut and closer. The one thing I like about these board books is they kind of expand at the spine. You know how if you journal and you're adding things into your journal, the outside edge expands a lot more than your spine because it's, you know, it's tight there and it's secured. But these, once you remove that piece that's covering the spine just kind of expands as well, and so it lays flat. And I'm just making sure all my edges are glued. And this is Liquitex. I'm sure there's other brands. I've had this for quite a while. I don't use it that much, but this is extra heavy gesso. And so I just kind of want to put it where my edges meet, maybe some other spots. And I like using the extra heavy because you can just put a glob down, and then with a palette knife flat and with a light touch you can just skim it, and it kind of gives you skips, or as Tim Holtz would say, skippity bits. And so I really like that about it. So I'm going to put it on some of the seams where the papers come together, and then a few other spots. I'm also putting some on the edge of the palette knife and just making hatch marks, kind of. And so just leaving a very thin line of the thick gesso, just to make it look a little different. And I do come back with that gesso again because there was one spot that I thought needed just a little bit of something, and that's it. I let that dry. I also added a coat of Collage medium on there just to seal in the paper, and I do that so that I can add distress inks or something on there, because if you don't, it's fine if you don't, but I tend to not like something a lot. So this way, if I add some distress ink on there and I don't like it, I can wipe it right off. If I didn't do that, it soaks right into the paper and that's it. So I didn't want to have to cover up on any of these pages because I didn't like what I did with distress ink. And also, even what I'm doing here, if I hadn't liked the texture paste, because I added the Collage medium, I could have wiped it right off. This is Crackle opaque white texture paste. And so I let that dry, and I'm taking a distressed crayon. This is Victorian Velvet, and I'm just kind of rubbing it on the tops of the Crackle texture paste, and I mainly just want it to end up in the cracks, not really totally around. I don't want it to cover my pages or anything, so I'm just kind of wiping it on the top. You could do this with Distress Ink. I'm not sure how it wouldn't work as well because this has got a lot of pigment in it, so maybe Oxide would be better. But anyways, it absorbs the color, so I mean you could do it. You may just want to add a couple of layers, but so now I'm adding some water so it seeps down into the cracks, and then mopping up anything that got on my page. So that's starting to look a little grungy, which I like, and so I'm going to add some vintage photo around the edges and also give it a splatter of vintage photo. For my splatter, I just press my pad on my mat, give a couple spritz of water, and I have a real thick brush here, and I make sure the brush is soaked with water before I put it in my ink, or else it will just absorb all that water and won't have any left to splatter. Anyway, so I splatter, but use whatever brush you have. And I'm going to add a couple pieces on each page of ephemera. The leaf is, I just had a scrapbook piece of paper, like a cardstock, and it was leaves and limes, or lemons, I guess, leaves and lemons, and I thought, well, that might make good leaves, stems. So I drew on the back of it what I wanted to cut out, and then I just cut out from there. And when I glue it, you'll see what I mean, because you'll see my sketch marks of drawing the leaves. And then I'm gonna put a little more pinkish butterfly on the left and a more purplish butterfly on the right, because I think they go well. See there, you can see my sketches on the back. And I mean, do you need the leaves? No, I think it would have been fine without the leaves. But and then I only glue on the body of the butterfly so that the wings can come away from the page. And I did the same to the other side with a deep purple butterfly, which I think looks great. And that's it. If you haven't subscribed yet, I invite you to do that, to follow along. I'd love to have you join us. And if you liked what you saw, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. Either way, I hope you have a great day. I have some final pictures coming up, so stay tuned for those, but see you next time.